How's it going? How's it going? How are all of you? I am Crunk Chocolate, and welcome to Behind the Tactics. And I have a wonderful guest with me. But before we get into the conversations, if you're watching live right now on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, like the video. If you're watching the replay, do the same thing. You know, it all helps out. If you are one of those mini lurkers on Twitter, like the stream, retweet, quote tweet, just bring more people in here, just up the vibe, shall we? Our guest has quickly become someone whose perspective on football I very much enjoy, and it's perfect for people like me. Like, I love a good eye test, body language, continuity with the squad. Those are the things that speak to me. And the problem with that is, while explaining what I'm seeing to people, it can be like gibberish, it's opinions. You can cast that stuff away. Like the great wordsmith Jay-Z once said, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Here's where our guest comes in. Creator of the Sky Blue Times, can give you thorough breakdowns on players, comps, teams, and their tactics, but it's with numbers, graphs that are easy to understand. People like Bailey here bring statistical validity to the madness I say here on Shades of Blue. Shady gang, stand up. Please give it up for Bailey Wynne. How are you doing, homie? How you doing? How you feeling?
I'm doing very, very well today. I think I'm one of the people blessed to have the opportunity to have an intro from you. I think that was lovely to hear, and really looking forward to this episode and what we're going to get into talking about.
Yes, most definitely. Let's start here with an easy one. Sky Blue Times. Like, what inspired you to create it, the visual newsletter? And from there, how has the whole experience been?
So I think first off, I was consuming a lot of City content, so yours included, as well as a load of different people around the space, different kind of formats, and I got to the point where I was kind of consuming so much that I'd rather be contributing towards it rather than just consuming loads of content and spending my time in that front. And I enjoyed a lot of the content I was listening to, watching, but I didn't want to spend all my time doing that. I'd rather be a bit more productive and kind of add to the conversation in that way. And then when it came to the newsletter, I thought this is something that nobody else is doing. It gives me somewhere I could kind of write, do it consistently, build up a kind of good library of content and just get more and more practice. So I wasn't really expecting to get many people interested at all, really, let alone go on podcasts or anything like that. It was just a case of, can I practice this somewhere? Can I improve this skill and just kind of keep working at it, see where it goes in 6 months to a year, and go from there, really. And I pretty much cover matches, whether it's previews, reviews, do a lot of stuff to do with tactics to data, as you've kind of alluded to in the intro, do threads as well, trying out a few different other pieces of content, but that's the main format, really, is covering Manchester City more in that data tactics kind of lens. And then yeah, it's kind of just gone from there. It's been lovely to see.
In this world where there are plenty of people like me giving takes and thoughts and what we're seeing, I try to do a more nuanced and explain why I say what I say, but there aren't enough people who are like you, who back or try to back their thoughts and what they're saying with on hand stats, where you're just like, hey, if you don't believe me, I can send the stuff to you. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm going. And through that is where people have come to trust your thoughts and how you see things. And that's what I very much like. And you said it yourself, you didn't quite expect to be so, I guess, front facing, people paying attention to your words and seeing you now on this live stream. But when the time calls, the time calls. And I just love that, you've stepped up and you've embraced it, because for lack of better terms, if you didn't, there would be someone who might step in and try to do what you're doing, and they may or may not have done it as well as you. And so I'm just happy that because there is a really dope community of content city content creators. I'm always not the biggest fan of calling people that because I feel like it's just such a vague open word. But yeah, there are a lot of really cool people doing things out there that is super exciting, and you're definitely one of them. And it's nice to hear you. Like the first time I saw the name Bailey on 9320, like in the episode description, obviously a while ago. And I was like, "Huh, that's funny. There's another guy that I follow on Bailey." And like to me, it's not a like a prevalent name. So silly me if I follow the one person. And then it took a couple of times you being on, and then like I feel like maybe you posted and you're like, "Hey, I'm on 93." And I was like, "Whoa, that's you!" Like it put like it was a really fun connection because it's it's one thing when you enjoy one set of people in their own thing, but when they combine and they start working together, that's when like real joy comes in, and you're just like, yes, love it. So it's great to see the powers combining.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And only really can say I've been grateful for those opportunities. I remember I was just writing away doing my threads, and then it's LB. If you're listening, then thank you for the opportunity that he gave me, invited me on a live stream, jump on that. He said he really enjoyed my threads, but from my point of view, I was just writing stuff, posting it, see you later, and then I was off and carried on the rest of my day. So you kind of realize like, oh, okay, people do listen, they pay attention, they value what you write, and that's lovely to see. And then got the opportunity to go on there, and it's kind of go from there. And I think you make a great point about people within the space, within the community, kind of coming together and supporting one another. Is really nice to see, even if it's just somebody reposting somebody else's content
Mhm.
or they're quoting it and sharing an opinion of how much they enjoyed it, whether it's listened to, read that content, whatever it is. I think that's just really great to see, and you've done a lot of that on your show as well.
Yeah, we're definitely big on collaboration. We're also way over here on the US, so feel like there's a lot less, well, at least on my end. I've done the ego death in my own separate individual life experiences. So I'm just happy to be here and connect, especially over here in the US. There's a lot of beliefs and thoughts of how we see football, how we talk about football, how we enjoy it. And it's one thing to talk about football here at Shades of Blue. I really wanted to like really push on the whole culture aspect and really embracing as much of, the English football that we can, that doesn't like give me the icks or that I cringe about. But I definitely saw last night there's a music festival going around in my area, and I was at it last night, and the guy walked past in a United shirt, and I just go, "How about you do one, you rag? Come on, do something." And he just walks by super quiet, and my friends are just like, "Wow, he's really not going to say anything." And so he's walking away, and I'm just site, site, like I'm just going crazy, and my friends are just like, "This is the greatest thing," and I'm just like, "Yeah, this is kind of the energy that we should get." I'm gonna be honest, most United fans in my area who they're rocking the kids and I give them crap, they never say anything to me. It doesn't, I don't even have to be wearing City stuff. I wasn't even wearing anything City. I was just giving him shit and he didn't even come back at me. Like, bro, what are you wearing the shirt for? Like, where's the pride? Especially when they don't come at me, that's when I go at them harder because I'm just like, oh, you're just a little fake boy. You're the plastic. You're the plastic. You're the reason why people hate us.
I think that's definitely one thing that probably is going to take time to kind of
Yes.
translate over to
Mhm.
the US, really, isn't it? And I think the preseason, definitely from our perspective, being European, you kind of see the growth in the stadium and then the buzz around leading up to the game, training sessions, like all that kind of stuff. You realize just how much of an impact the team is making, obviously commercially on the pitch, what they do for fans, giving them the opportunity, and then the fan base growing, which, as always, is just great to see. And it's nice to see the content creators that are US based just getting those opportunities and just enjoying the experience around City that they wouldn't get unless they came over.
Yeah, and I'm here for these preseason games. I don't even want a real PL League match here in the US. Like, give us the fun, the cheeky, the media availability. Because if the Premier League comes over here, we're not getting the open practices. We're not getting any of this stuff. So I think this gives us a one of a kind experience that really does foster. I feel like if they come here during the Premier League, that's where the diehards are going to come. And that's when I think the attendance might get a little like iffy. Yes, it should be, you should draw on the same amount of crowds and all that stuff, but it's during the season. There's other US sports competing, things going on. I think it could just get real scary real fast. Maybe the first year, of course, everybody's super excited about coming to a Premier League match in the US for the first time. But I think after a year or two or three, it might get a little scary. And I don't want them to do something like that would take a lot of work and planning and adjustments, all for maybe 3-4 years into it. They're just like, this actually isn't worth it. It's kind of destroying the game a little bit, even though we know it would, but it's destroying the game and then having to renege on it. And it's just more vitriol to the US. Let's keep our preseason games. Let's keep everything cute and shiny and fun. And let's leave all the seriousness in England.
Yeah, it's it's a pretty hot topic, really, isn't it? To mention playing the games in the US,
Yes.
definitely on definitely on Twitter if you want to mention it on there. You'll probably get a few people quote tweeting you and commenting in unison and all that kind of stuff. But I think it'll be interesting to see where it goes, because as much as what you said is stuff I agree with and good points to make, commercially they need to grow, and there's going to be that kind of push to, can you crack America? Because if you don't, another league will. So I do think they're going to push in some way. Not sure how they're going to do it. I know, do you see in La Liga they were doing games in, I think it was Saudi, they were doing games like their Super Cup games. So maybe they do something on that front. And I always felt like a preseason tour is a proper tournament. Seems like a slam dunk for them to go after. If they can run it well, you get the top teams that you want to get involved in that. Just seems like an obvious thing, but there's not really been a clear plan of how we're going to move more games over to the US that necessarily isn't Premier League, so it won't annoy a lot of fans in that regard. But then we can still give them games that are somewhat more meaningful. It's probably they're probably in a bit of a rock and a hard place in terms of trying to like figure that out.
Yeah, I agree, because they work with this company called FC Series, and that's kind of the thing with America. If you're going to come here and do things in America, you're probably going to have to work with American companies. So that's what would make it very difficult for City to kind of throw their own tournament, because like they have to work through FC Series and they want to bring as many people in. The only thing that I can see is if they team up with NYCFC, because they have their own facility and all that other stuff, and maybe just play other CFG teams. I feel like that's the only really way that they could control a tournament of their own. It could also highlight and push all of their other teams in the CFG program. And they could do that in the US. There's a new stadium being built for NYCFC in Queens. It'll be open in 2026. It wouldn't surprise me if they use the Queens in the NYCFC stadium. They're not close, but they're not like that far apart. You could easily have the stadium and the people pick which side they want to. That's obviously just an idea, but that's something that I could definitely see within the next like 5 or 10 years, as they host their own with the CFG teams, if they want to continue to build the lower teams, I guess. Because, you know, do you want to be a worldwide name, or do you want the CFG product to become a worldwide name? I guess that's really what they need to figure out.
Well, particularly with the South American teams as well. Like, so many people from South America are in the US, aren't they? And then it's easier to an extent for them to travel across. So you've got they've got a team in Brazil, team in Uruguay. I think they've got a team in Bolivia as well. Obviously, Girona, Latin country as well in Spain. So I think that's a really good idea if they did do that and then did link up with New York, bring over Man City, and then you could do like a real kind of beneficial tournament, kind of all on all parties, really, for all parties there, I think
so too. All right, well, let's get into the football. Thanks for just letting me go completely off script for that, but that was a good chat. It's amazing what a week will do, because behind the scenes for listeners, I wanted Bailey to fill me in on a few players that were linked to City. But there's Bruno G and Eze. Their release clauses are done. Bruno G is saying everything that he needs to either drive up the price or he does, in fact, want to become a Newcastle legend, which is respect to him. So I'll kind of go along that same thing, but not hold you to these specific players. Who do you feel is the player that City should bring in? Or are you okay with what we have now?
I'm probably not as much like as panicking as much as most people are. Like Bob, for example, being injured, I wouldn't rush to make a move to bring somebody in. And then if we look at Alvarez being missing now a backup striker role, again, I'm not as kind of panicking to bring somebody in. It's rather just finding the right person for me. And then because of the experience of Nunes last season and a few other people in the previous seasons, you kind of get a bit burnt where you think that's going to clog up the wage bill. You got a player that doesn't really kind of fit, doesn't really gel, costs a significant amount of money. You don't want to do one of them again. So that's probably where I'm at in terms of being quite hesitant on that front. But I think 6'8", somebody essentially a Gundogan replacement that would be nice to have. That is the one role that I would kind of throw whatever money is available at, and that is why Bruno Guimaraes that you just mentioned. I think he is the most obvious example of that. That would be plug and play, and if he did come in and play next to Rodri and then also be able to cover him, you get rid of our biggest weakness, and then you also put together two players that would be a pretty impressive duo. I think it's as close as you can get to saying City are clear favourites for the league. I think if you were to put those kind of two players together with all the abilities that those two have.
Yeah. Okay. I'm with you, but when it comes to the midfield, we just have we have multiple new young French players who are going to need time. Have said that Foden, Bernardo, he would like to play them more centrally. There's the rumor that Kovacic and Pep spent time to kind of go over what would Kovacic's replacement for Rodri be. Yes, he's not the defensive dynamo. Nobody really is the defensive dynamo. And Rodri wasn't in his first year at City. Wasn't the man he is now. So it's just, last season I hated the idea of Kovacic and as Rodri, but the preseason, I obviously you can't take much from the games itself, but you can take a lot from how the players they do and their confidence and the moves that they made. And Kovacic looked really good on the ball. He looked confident. I know one of the things specifically they were saying that in the conversation that him and Pep supposedly had was when to pass, when to run, because Kovacic's whole thing is to just run past everybody, dribble past everybody. But if you're one of our defensive last lines of defense, like you can't be going too crazy. And I feel like he sometimes he'll make the run and then you can see in his brain, he's realizing, oh, I've gone too far. I need to either pass or whatever. And that's when we tend to lose the ball. He made some good decisions during the preseason. He looked good in the Community Shield. Are you expecting him to, I mean, obviously Rodri's not going to be playing tomorrow. Do you think Kovacic is going to be in that spot tomorrow against Chelsea? Is this his like audition for the backup Rodri spot, basically?
I think so, yeah. And I think then beyond that is having the right kind of combination of midfielders around him. So Bernardo Silva, I think, would be excellent if he's just in midfield, isn't kind of restricted to providing width on the right-hand side as a winger and defending out there. He's just staying in the middle. Then I think those two can figure that out. I think O'Reilly in preseason showed you a lot of stuff with his qualities and the potential that Pep really does like with his size and the way he can also burst forward with the ball and then run back in recovery. But it goes back to what you just mentioned on the positioning of being disciplined, knowing when to sit, when to just cover the space, not when to jump out, be aggressive too much of the time. And it's also one of the hardest positions to fill. It's incredibly hard to find a player that's capable of doing that. You've seen Arsenal struggle to find that because as brilliant as Rice is defensively, some of the stuff he does on the ball is just not at the same level that you would want for a 6 all-in-one. And so a lot of teams, I think, if I remember right, I saw somewhere like over 60% of the teams in the top 5 leagues all play a double pivot, and that is
Mm,
because it's just so difficult to find somebody that's capable of playing a lone six that ticks all the boxes that you want. Um, so yeah, I do think combination that you mentioned, putting Kovacic in there, Bernardo, and then probably one of Phil or De Bruyne seems like the best option. And bear in mind, this would be, we're talking 5 to 10 to 15 games really that are a good place that Rodri gets a complete rest
mhm.
on at all. I think those would go a long way for him, particularly if he's can avoid not even being in the squad, but definitely to be on the bench and just never come on, never warm up at all. I think that would really be beneficial for him, and that would just do exactly what we want. And then it would also then mean that Kovacic picks up minutes that way. That then you feel like you can kind of reduce his role alongside Rodri because you're trying to fit in Bernardo, you're trying to fit in some other players, Foden, De Bruyne moving inside as well. So I do think that seems to be what they're kind of setting up.
Okay. And so along these lines, when Rodri is in, do you think Pep has cracked the whole Rodri, Foden, KDB midfield? Because I know he was very apprehensive last year about it, but it was more just who between Phil Foden and KDB, and we know it's supposed to be Phil, who's going to help with the defensive end and trying to help save Rodri so he doesn't have to do everything all the time. And will Phil be interested in that part? Do you think it's going to have to take an adjustment in what Pep does, or do you think Phil has that dog in him that to take that next step and become a almost box to box midfielder on top of what he already is?
So the stumbling block for Pep is who plays alongside Rodri when we're defending out of possession and we're setting a 4-4-2 block. So in the
Mhm.
middle, you would have Rodri plus somebody else. So Kovacic does that really, really well. Gundogan does that really, really well. But if you look at the Euros when they played De Bruyne there, wasn't the best kind of fit. That's why he doesn't play him there. And Foden as well, he doesn't trust him to sit in that position, or at least that's what I've seen so far. So to find the kind of right fit is what he's struggling to do, I think. And unless he changes his mind on either of them being able to play in that position,
Mm.
it's hard to kind of find the right thing unless it's something like last season where he's moving around the fullbacks. I think John Stones might be part of that solution if he is fit and he's doing, let's say, 2,000 plus minutes this coming season.
Mm.
Then him going in next to Rodri might be an option that he kind of plays around with. But it's a hard one to figure out because I know the wingers that we've got, they're going to play. So then I can't see us using the fullbacks in exactly the same way either, because you would want Grealish, Doku, Savino, and then eventually Bob to play on those wings, at least two of them. So you don't need the fullbacks to provide the width. So it's kind of like hard to figure out exactly what way he will go on that. But they're both exceptional players. They should be able to figure it out. And if we're being honest, last season was to an extent a failure of Pep to have not found a solution to cover Rodri. He should be good enough to figure out a viable solution, and he didn't really do that.
And this is where I will give, and it's not necessarily bail, but it's where I understand because in a lot of what Pep does, yes, he breaks everything down for people in an incredibly difficult, simplified term that with time everybody understands. But with that, you still have to have that fire, that passion, that confidence to then do that extra thing. Because, like, my argument where people say Pep has killed creativity in football, he has set everybody up for success, and it is on to them to make the most out of what Pep gives them. Like, that's what frustrates him so much about Grealish, because it's just like, Grealish, if you just do a little bit more, you could be a killer. Right? We see Daku, he immediately on playing with City, we saw with time once he like learned a little bit more, because he'd come in, he'd be a spark, but he wasn't tracking back. And then all of a sudden you see him tracking back. And then you see him pausing a little bit more, a little more calmer. You've seen the growth with him, but the dynamism, the creativity, it's all still there. It's all in the player. And that's kind of what worries me about just kind of how people hate on Pep and saying that putting a player in Pep ball, whether it's defensively, midfield, or whatever, that he's gonna stifle them. He's so many players say that Pep brings out the best in them. I just think that it's kind of up to that player to then make the best of what they have been taught by Pep.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the winger thing, and it is something that I've discussed with Asan about trying to do a podcast around that kind of myth of Pep destroys wingers. Because
Mm,
if you go through his time at Barcelona, where you're looking at Messi and Villa and Pedro and Thierry Henry, and then you go to Barcelona with Robin and Ribery and Kingsley Coman and Douglas Costa as well. You go with Mahrez, Sane, Sterling, like you go through all the wingers, and they're not what the stereotype is at all. And I think these last kind of 2 seasons, this kind of control narrative, and to an extent, it's an excuse, and then to an extent, it's justifiable with
mhm,
Bernardo. But that's kind of, I think, clouded people from the fact that Pep does want to find the right tools and use those tools in their right way. And I think for Doku, I saw a clip where he was saying how I don't teach him how to dribble. I just make sure he's in the right space to do what he's exceptional at as much as possible. Um, and that really is kind of like fundamental to how these coaches succeed, is putting the best players in their best places.
mhm,
So yeah, it's a bit of a hard one. I think Grealish though is a bit different to say Bernardo, where in Bernardo, I think his role playing out wide has to an extent waned in terms of his influence, in terms of how effective he is. And as it's become more and more important that whoever is out wide is able to be dynamic 1v1, like you've said about with other players, and Bernardo isn't that,
mhm,
and the space inside is getting shut down. We need players to be exceptional out wide. You've seen him struggle, whereas with Grealish, he's had so many issues that, if we're being honest, like off the pitch as well as on the pitch, like family issues as well as his own self having issues as well, like without the motivation and the fitness and so on and so on. Um, that he's a kind of a bit of a different kettle of fish. And I
mhm,
think in pre-season you've seen, definitely for me, and I'm kind of reluctant to say he's looked really good because you want him to perform in the season, but he has looked sharper. He has looked more
mhm,
willing to pull the trigger. He does look like he drives inside a lot more. And that is what we're going to need from our wingers. And he's going to know it because he's got Doku that can play on that side. Savinho can play on that side. And if worst case, Phil Foden needs to fit in the team because it's blocked in the middle, he'll consider playing Foden there as well because he feels like Foden has to be in the team.
mhm.
So Grealish does have his work cut out in that front. So he does have to force the issue and be a weapon out wide. And that, as we can go on later or touch on now, that's going to be a theme for me this season, is how do we attack the wide spaces in and out of possession.
Yeah, totally. We can get into that specifically because, yeah, with Bob going down, I think that does put some pressure on Savinho, however you want to say it. Because we know he's going to get playing time. We saw what he can do. I just think Bob going down forces people to be, doesn't force them because they have a choice, but it forces people to be a little more impatient with seeing Savio. I'm sure people will want to see him immediately. And a lot of people, with Bob going down, there's, I think we're fine. We'll make the adjustments. It hurts my heart because for years I've been saying, finally, this is the season that Bernardo will be moved inside. And he, because when he's a winger, he's just a glorified midfielder. Like that's all he is. It's unfortunate. And our team always struggles with that. Unless he's playing Real Madrid, then he becomes a baller. But I want to be able to have these wingers, let Bernardo be in the midfield and actually cook it with, like, I'm pretty sure we're going to see Bernardo in right wing tomorrow. And it's just because it's a lot of pressure to put on Savinho. I know Grealish's injury isn't as bad as we thought, but I don't expect to see him. So it's going to make things a little weird and wavy. And I think it's going to take a bit for us to actually see the squad or the style of football that Pep is going to consistently play. And I know I'm not saying anything like huge because it's always like stop and go at the beginning of the season. But I feel like we have to constantly tell people to relax because we just know how crazy things get immediately.
Yeah, well, it's that kind of ongoing thing, isn't it? That until Christmas, don't worry about the table. We're just figuring out, trying new things, trying on different hats and shoes and whatnot, and seeing what works, really, aren't we? So it will be interesting. But I think on your thing with the wingers, I think the thing with Bob, and I think you'll be on the same line as me with this, is you see his potential. You know how
Yes.
good he can be, and that he's going to have probably a breakthrough season. That either he's going to get nominated for Young Player of the Year or he's going to be the level below. I think that is the season he's capable of delivering. So to have that injury, you see that player gone now, and that's really, really tough. But as devastating it is for him individually, for the team, we still have plenty of options because you still have on the left Grealish, Doku, Savinho, Foden can all play there. You go on the right, you mentioned Bernardo as well as Savinho, Doku, and Foden can all play there. So it's not like you're looking at either of those positions and thinking, wow, nobody is capable there. It's going to be a real kind of plug. Even Nunes could play on the wing, really, like at proper bind. So
Mhm.
you actually have options. You're not completely ran out. But it will be interesting to see because now this kind of pushes Savinho a little bit further up the totem pole where he has to get a bit more minutes earlier doors. So if Grealish isn't there, I could see Doku and Savinho starting as both the wingers. And that would be a heck of a lot of fun and something we've been waiting for. And I would be interested to hear what you thought about Savinho in Community Shield, but when it comes to playing on either wing, he can be quite different. So on the
Mhm.
right wing, I think he's more towards what Mahrez would be. His right foot isn't half as good as his left foot, but his left foot is pretty exceptional, and he can cut inside, shoot on that, as well as create from there. But then if you flip him over to the left side, then you have somebody that can hit the byline and float crosses all day long to Haaland. And then if you then flip that to Doku, you have the option with him to do the same thing where if you put him on the left side, he can cut in and shoot very, very well. Obviously, beat his man and then curl it around them to the far post. And he can also cut inside to cross, as well as being the guy on the right hand side that can just hit the byline. So just with those two players alone, you have loads of options. And then if Grealish was fit, you could then say, right, now I can play Grealish on the left. He can be more of my kind of guy that's drawing people towards him, somebody that can progress us up that side and just be defensively solid with Guardiola at the very least. And then I know whoever's on the right side, if it's Doku or Savinho, I can just say, take the shackles off and go for it down that side. So you've already got so many options listed in front of you for Pep, and I think that's the most dangerous thing.
Oh man, the idea of 'cause Grealish, the way that players just want to foul him, it's like truly a great skill. Just players close in on him, and especially the way that he dribbles into the midfield. I want him and Baku, Sabio, whoever, to really get that timing down with each other because I think they should really be able to take advantage of just everyone paying way too much attention to Grealish and with Daku and Savinho's speed, just hit it into space and let them create. And then we got the Nordic meat shield right there. Just get the ball anywhere near him. That's my biggest thing. Is last year there were so many times where we were just like, pass, make the mistake. And you could just hear the players, or you could see the players hearing Pep screaming at them already to not lose the ball. With Daku, with Savinho, I don't think they're going to have that fear because in their brain, we're going to get the ball back. They're going to be able to create another chance. And it's that self belief that's going to have us hopefully scoring 3, 4, 5 goals instead of these 2-1, 3-2 thrillers. I'm tired of these thrillers. I want to go back to smashing people. Oh,
Yeah, and I
uh,
think, or just on top of that, you do
yeah.
have to give the opposition questions. And if you're having Savinho or Doku on either wing, then the defenders now have a decision to make, and the midfielders included. Do I double up on that guy? Do I give him a little bit less space? Because if I do that, then I'm giving Phil Foden and De Bruyne and Bernardo a little bit more space in midfield. And then by having those options out wide, you're going to suddenly open up more space for us. Whereas last season, you look at how successful the system that we were using Foden and De Bruyne was, but you could also see the flaws because without the width, teams could cheat and shut down the central areas easier. And then the FA Cup, I think, was a very, very good example of that. That the double pivot for United knew we just need to shut down Foden and De Bruyne and keep it tight in there because they're not going to be able to attack the spaces out wide. So that for me, as I said, with the wide spaces and how we attack that, the players that we have that are so dynamic, as you mentioned, that is going to be fascinating to watch over the course of the season.
So to you, is that going to be the most important piece of the season is our wing play and how if they're able to maintain with while creating, I guess, goals and assists?
Yeah, for sure. And I don't look at either of the wingers and say that guy needs to get 3,500, 4,000 minutes. I'm looking at all of them thinking it'd be ideal if they'd all got at least 2,000, if not 2,500 each. And then you have 4 different players that are fresh on the wings that you can rotate compared to Arsenal, where Saka's going to play majority of the games on the right wing because nobody's really capable of rotating with him. And then, Jesus has an injury in him. You've got just Havertz up front. You've got Martinelli on the left side that's kind of really struggling. Trossard that had some really, really bright moments throughout last season, but that's all they have across that front line. You look at us, and then you've got 4 players across the 2 wing spots, 2 other players in Bernardo and Foden that could play there, and then you've got Haaland up front as well. So you've got a lot of options, and if we can keep that fresh, rotated, and sharp, and they all have their different moments throughout the season where they are on form, then I think that would be one of the key reasons why we would win a title.
Let's go. I'm with you. I don't want to stay on Arsenal too quick, but everybody's excuse that it's just Arsenal's time to win, I don't really get that methodology. Yes, City have won over and over and over again, and eventually they can't continue to win, but that has been the excuse for the last 3 years. Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, and I just feel like that's all everyone is doing at this moment, is saying the same things over and over, and I'm just like, do you guys hear yourselves? Like, just copy and paste what you said last year. This is it.
Yeah, to me, I think it's fair to say Arsenal can win the league, and there's a lot of reasons to be excited about that team. There's a lot of players in that team to be excited about. You look at how well they are, how well they handle set pieces. I don't think that's going to go away. They may struggle to score the same amount just because of variance and be able to convert those chances, but they're clearly well drilled in set pieces, so that's one factor. They've definitely got an advantage on City at the moment. You look at the key players they have in Rice, Odegaard, Saliba, and Gabriel. Like, there's so many players to be excited about and be positive about, and there's good reason to. But it really does frustrate me when the kind of punditry, the comments, the analysis comes down to, well, City don't have the hunger anymore, or it's Arsenal time, they're due. They were technically the better team last season, because of the numbers and stuff like that. All those kind of arguments just feel a little bit unfair, really. I think you only have to look at the City documentary to see how motivated they really are. So for me, that shouldn't really be a factor. And at the end of the day, it's most likely going to come down to a real fine margin between the 2 teams. And if we look at last season, City had a significant injury to De Bruyne and Stones, completely changed the team, lost Gundogan, lost Mahrez. You look at all the players, Grealish as well. So that treble team, that system that we all loved that worked so well, next season, gone. Start again, figure something else out. For Arsenal, you didn't have those injuries, you didn't have those loss of players. They kept those same players together. So I think there's so many reasons to be more optimistic about City in terms of where they could make improvements versus Arsenal. I think it's more of a case of, you were great last season, can you be great again? Whereas City, it's you were average compared to your other Premier League title winning seasons. Can you make us can you make that step up again? So for me, I'd definitely lean towards City on that.
Yes, and fair. I don't want to make it sound like I am hating. I'm slagging on Arsenal. I guess I want to be the contrast because there are just so many people speaking highly of them. I want to be that person to be like, well, actually, like, yes, Calafiori, the few moves they've made, but when you were talking about that front line, it was like, oh, is this really what I'm supposed to fear? They've, so many of their wins have just come off late victories, these like stressful moments, and I would figure by now Arteta would try to minimize those types of games. Like his whole problem in his first few seasons where they were only focusing on the attacking end, and when things get tight and difficult, how do you lock in? How do you make sure you hold on to that lead or you can win a 1-0 match? Now, I feel like he's gone on the other end where he's just focused on winning those dogfights. He needs to be able to have that flexibility to know when you can run with some people and know when to just like stick with your style. And I don't think he's off on the right foot hiring pickpocketers. Like that energy just screams to me just like stress mentality. Get ready to just be on edge all the time, team. And that's not a great start knowing there's 9 more months, 10 months to go in the season. It's just, to me, mentally, it's not a great start.
Well, just on that, I think we're really seeing these past 2 seasons the separation away from Arteta being kind of reported in the media as like a disciple of Pep and similar to him and a copy and all that sort of stuff. I think last season you really saw just how different these two are and how they see the game. And when I had John McKenzie on one of the recent podcasts with the 9320, he was saying how Arteta looks at out of possession tactics as how can I be the best in the world at that? How can I get better? Whereas Pep views that more as how can I make that good enough that it doesn't take away from what we do on the ball when we're in possession and we are attacking. So you look at Mourinho possibly coming in as a new signing. He's going to be exceptional at winning duels and all the out of possession sort of stuff defensively. He's going to be incredible for them. But he's not a signing that I've seen Arsenal fans call for, whether it's a winger that's going to be a real game changer. I've seen him talk about Leao and Sane and Rashford and all these sort of players because they all see the attack being a thing that if we can just make that just that little bit better and we can just tweak that a little bit more, then we can find the right balance and open up a bit more in that way. Whereas it seems like from the signings and from what I've seen Arsenal play, and they are incredible, they're probably, it's probably fair to say out of possession, they are the best team in the world, but they look to be leaning more towards that. And so that could be their undoing. That's probably something to watch, as well as their right-hand side is incredible with Saka, White, Odegaard down that side. But it is obvious that that is their strength. So if somebody can figure out how to shut that down, and it's definitely not easy to do so, then that could really hinder them, just as well as having an injury to one key player. You feel like if Odegaard gets an injury or Rice gets an injury, I'm not sure they have a player that can fulfill that to the same level. They'd still be really, really good. They just wouldn't be right at the top that they could be.
That's fair. Okay. Let's get to these fringe first team players. João Cancelo, Calvin Phillips, Issa Kabore. Phillips on loan to Ipswich. However, Pep did say Calvin could return next season and stay. Pep on Cancelo said, hey, we're chill. We say hello to each other and we're trying to get him out of here. But if he stays, I'll respect him as a player. And then just Issa Kabore is just there. I really haven't heard much from him. Which of these three players stands the best chance of staying permanently at City?
I'll probably disappoint you to say that I don't think any of them have a chance. If I'm being honest,
that's fair. No, that's fair.
Honest. I think Pep's an exceptional salesman, and I think if you're the club, you're very happy that goes out there and says the things he does.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I read it more as we're looking to move these players on, but he knows not to say the wrong thing, not to dishearten the player. Like there's no value in that for him or
Mm-hmm.
the club or to the relationship with the player at all. So I think is the best thing to do is to be respectful in a professional way. And hopefully for Phillips, that's a good spot for him where he gets his confidence back. We see more of what we saw in pre-season where he just looks happy on the pitch and knows what he's doing and it's less complicated and the game's in front of him. I think that'll help him and ideally then gets a move next summer. And we move on from that. I think Cancelo does Barcelona come up the money? Otherwise, he's probably got to suck it up and go to Saudi because I don't think there's anybody else interested in him. And then Kabore, I think, can do well at other clubs, but if they're selling Yan Kutu on, they're keeping Rico Lewis. I don't see a place for Kabore because he's not a kind of like best in the world right back that's complete in every kind of facet. He would be more kind of a specialist right back for us if he was, and Rico has that role at the very least. So, and even if Walker did move on, I think they would look for somebody that would be like my ideal would be Reece James minus all the injuries.
That's right.
That kind of player that ticks every box that you'd want as a fullback, as well as being available. They would rather wait for the right person rather than kind of fill in with somebody like that. And for me, I don't know how much you watched of him, but I think he could definitely play in the Premier League and find a good club. And I think that's at the very least, like that's great. Even with the academy players, look at Delap's at Ipswich and looks a handful. And I think for the academy players, Hamilton as well at Middlesbrough, I think that's really nice to see. And if they make it to be a Premier League player, that's great for them and their career.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you 100% with all of the people, including Kabore. I like the idea of it. Tarek on our pod, he's the pod dad. So all of our like youth, young players, he just is so hopeful for them. He just wants them to make it on the team. And just also seeing so many of the young players, I went to 2 of the games for the US tour. New York.
You were the first one as well, didn't you? So you saw a lot.
Yep. Yeah. And that I'm actually super happy that I went to the first game and I got to see almost how like rusty and not great the players were. So compared to the preseason game and the Community Shield, getting to see the growth that from O'Reilly, that Maka, I was like terrified for McAtee after that first preseason match. I know everyone was super excited about him. I've seen the long shot screamers that he scored all last year. I understand heritage, blah, 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 but he did not look locked in. He didn't look in shape. And I remember in one of the welcoming events, Jolie and Lescott and SWP, they were talking, and Lescott was like, a lot of these young players, they've known for weeks that they were coming here. So in my brain, they should be in the best shape of their lives and ready to go. And he just seemed one of those guys who wasn't like, and maybe it's just because he knew that he's in, that Pep loves him. He just didn't seem to be like trying as hard. And that was what kind of like scared me, because it was just like, if I can see that he's not trying as hard, I definitely know Pep does. But by the Community Shield and everything, he was running up and down. He was burning his little heart out, and that was beautiful to see. O'Reilly, yes, he has a little bit of time to go. He just starts dribbling and then forgets. You can just tell. Like he goes to like pass, but then he dribbles a little bit more. So once he gets a little more decision in him, I think he'll be great. I love watching these lads. That's
Did anybody else stand out to you other than the people you just mentioned?
I'm awful at his how do you say his name? The second one, it's like a 2 name. It's Pussy. How do you guys know how to say that?
No. Where does he? Where does he play?
Let me look at. He's City. He's one of the young wingbacks. Hold on, let me look up. He really impressed me. There were two of them. Hold on, give me a
There
sec.
was Wilson S. Brand. There was, is it Luke Mbete?
Luke Mbete looked not great. Not great. Like
Yeah.
specifically in the first match, Rico Lewis and JWE kept getting caught off by Celtic, and Celtic were just having the best.
Sissoko, was that what you on about?
Oh no, so Soho,
No?
he's a hold on, I need to get to this game so I can hold on, here we go. Here we go. Report highlights. Stupid website. Hold on. Oh, this is where it's showing. It's not the team. Their website is killing me. I'll figure it out anyway. But anyway, they're Sissoko. I like the promise of him. He still has. He's a little one trick, but I like the way that he expresses himself. You could definitely tell Hamilton. He has a lot of work to do. He still kind of has to grow into his body. There were a lot of Man City players where you could, or the youth players that you could tell that they still need to kind of grow into themselves.
So I think him and Wright for me were probably a year behind where I thought they could be. So next preseason, those two might make a bit more of an impact.
Yes.
Whereas O'Reilly and McAtee, Lewis and Bob were in the place that people thought they may get into. In Darlow, I like the look of as well, and I'm guessing he's going to move on. The winger who came on for Jack and then worked quite well with him in one of the games. What did you think of him?
Who was this? I'm sorry.
Ndala.
Oh, yes.
Played in the first game.
All very fun. You could see the step overs. They got the agility. They got the tricky, but it's if they don't have the ball, they disappear, and they don't really seem too much like they're tracking back, but they're tracking back because they know they need to track back. They're not like closing down on a player. They're not doing much of the off the ball things, and that's what they'll have to figure themselves out. But the player I was talking about, his name is Jemai Simpson Pousse. He's a defender.
Okay,
he's 18 though. He has a long, but during the practices, just in the drills, he looked very comfortable. In the rondo, he was getting interceptions. He was making some real nice passes. I think I have a video on my phone of him and Rico just like pinging the ball back and forth, and that was like really nice to see. Calvin Phillips, he, like you said, he was smiling. He looked happy. I saw him when he first came to City down in Texas. I was also in Texas, and I said immediately after to everyone I could hear, he's not going to be great. It's not going to be good. He started.
I think Pep probably said the same thing.
Yeah, and you knew from that practice. It was scary because I was super excited to see him because I remember seeing Mahrez and Cancelo, the things that they're doing with those skinny legs with the football. It's just like how are you doing that? And then you look at Calvin, and it's just the way that he was receiving the ball. He was just like getting shut down. He started with the starters, and by the end of the practice, he was doing the drills with the academy kids. And so that's how I knew it was just not going to be good, honestly. And so this time around, he looked great. He was making some sexy passes. I even tweeted, Calvin Phillips is back. And then the game played, and we saw what happened. So he's grown. He's made a lot of progress. It's not to City's liking. He can go elsewhere and be a quality player, but to City for City, it's just never going to be it, and it's unfortunate.
I think he's now past that kind of dip because he had that confidence that really dropped, didn't he? And I think now he's kind of rebounded from that, found his confidence a lot more happy within himself, and knows what he is and what he's not. But I think now it's just a case of going to somewhere like he has done with Ipswich, having a good loan spell, and then finding the right place where to be. And it's going to go down as one of, it feels harsh to say, worst move, but it's going to go down as that kind of signing, because you'd think the City recruitment team would be able to work out what he can and can't do. And for me, the signing is more of a case of the skills he doesn't have means he can't play in this City team, and that should have been obvious all the way through. I don't see
Mhm.
how that's kind of been mixed up. So that's a confusing thing. I did mean to ask you about in training. Did you watch? There's a 16-year-old centre back, Mufani, I think his name is. He came on for like a few minutes in the very last game.
Yes, yes,
You know
yeah.
if what he looked like in training, but I would love to see a centre back come through the academy. The other one you mentioned as well. That would be really nice.
He was, if I remember right, he has the size. He
Mm.
has the size, and that's what stuck out. Him and O'Reilly, those both were just actually Peroni as well. Like actually, Mike, all of them. They I'm so used to Bob and Rico are short kings. So seeing this like new batch of academy kids and they're like 6 foot, 5'11, 6'1, 6'2, that's kind of crazy to see. He has the size, still a little like awkward. I think he can grow into his own, but I don't know. I
Too
feel
early,
like
really, isn't it? But
yeah, especially when it
kind of
comes to
like middle of training.
defenders.
Mm.
Yeah, like they really have to grow into their strength and how they handle other people's physicality because there were definitely some city defenders that I thought could be the truth and they weren't it. And like Luke Mbete, I don't like again, I was really hopeful on him and he looked way out of his comfort zone during the preseason. And so that worries me.
All of our central defenders in the first team are all, I would say, fairly smart to a degree.
Yeah.
Some maybe a bit more than others, but uh, but I would say they're all pretty smart players, and they always seem to be in the right place at the right time. They're all very tidy on the ball. Obviously, again, some are a little bit more tidy than others. I think Diaz is probably better than most at carrying the ball, whereas Stones is probably better at passing the ball than most. But and Ake is exceptional at tackling compared to the rest of the team. So they all have their kind of different individual strengths, but they all are really quite disciplined and calm and tick all those boxes. And I think even if you're physically this monster, it doesn't
Mhm.
really matter if you're not composed, not good enough on the ball, and then not intelligent enough to be in the right position. And that's why Rico was pushed ahead because physically, in an age where everybody loves physicality, that Jude Bellingham is the best player in the world because of his physicality.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? He gets really thrust to the top and praised. Onana in the Premier League as well. Like all these kind of players that have these amazing physical attributes, they get praised. But you look at Rico without all of that. Imagine if Rico was just a few inches taller, like Pep said, with that
Mhm.
intelligence, that composure, and I think that's what you need for the centre back. So if we got somebody, oh wow, it'd be hard to get somebody as good as say Kabasi at Barcelona, but if we had a centre back coming through that was a very hot prospect like that, I'd love to see it. I would, and
Yeah.
I Doyle. That's what I meant to ask you about. What did you think of him? Because I wondered if because he's going on loan again, they definitely didn't want to lose him. So
Mhm.
my thought was, okay, let's see where you're at in a year's time.
I think they're hoping he does that McAtee growth spurt this year because that he looks the part. He just still seems a little overwhelmed by everybody else's size and physicality. So maybe he just needs to learn how he plays football a little bit more. And I'm always intrigued by how they pick the teams that they send each player to. Like, does it fit something that they're trying to teach these players? I've always been intrigued. Like, why
Mm.
4 different squads for Doyle? Like, that's always
But
like an intriguing thing.
so I think from what I heard about Norwich is they do play quite a progressive style of play. They will be on the ball. So I think that's definitely a factor. I know with Peterborough where Sissoko's gone to, he's picked up an injury, but they do play that kind of way as well, where you
Mm,
know he's going to get on the ball and he's going to be able to develop in that way, despite being at a lower league and the different kind of caveats that do come with that. So I think that definitely is a factor. But there are some loans that I look at and I go, oh, you're just finding him a spot. You're just getting him. So like in Mbete, I'm not looking at his move thinking that's a crafted loan. I'm thinking that's just you've just found him a good spot to go to, so he has somewhere to play minutes more than anything else. Whereas some, you can see they do find them a good place that does fit with the player, with the style of play, how they want them to develop. But I think if you could get somebody that's in and around that sort of stuff with recruitment, that would be a very fascinating conversation, I think, from any club, from any sport, really. But just to like, understand that kind of aspect, I think would be quite interesting conversation.
Right. Okay. Well, there's technically Pep, but there's no conversation that we'd be here much longer. So this just means I have to bring you back and we can just start with Pep, which is perfectly fine. But I do want to hear, how do you think the 2024-25 Premier League season ends? Like, who do you think will be the top 6?
So I think Manchester City will still win the Premier League title, as all the reasons I mentioned earlier on there with you, in terms of the upside that they've got, the players coming in, the way we can tackle the wide areas, and then how hard it is for Arsenal just to kind of maintain the same level. I do think it will be very close. I think they'll be behind. They'll finish second, and we're still probably talking somewhere between 0 to 10 points, and that probably depends on whether they pick up an injury and stuff like that. But I do expect them to be very close. So I would say they're probably going to get over 80 points again. And I think we'll probably be in the 90 range is what I'm guessing. And then I put Spurs, which I'm probably higher than most people on, for third, just because I like the setup of the team. I like the manager. And I do think Solanke's an excellent signing that fits them, as well as some of the other players they've got do fit what they need. And I didn't put Liverpool third. I put them fourth just because I'm unsure about the manager. And definitely after watching the first half today, I'm still not entirely sure the players know what they're doing, as much as they have a lot of quality. And if we look at last season, there were a lot of games they won they shouldn't have won, but they did because of the manager, because of the way they play, how aggressive they are. I think that did factor in there. So I'd still put them fourth just because of quality of the players. And then I put Newcastle fifth, Aston Villa sixth. I think if Newcastle get Gahey and they get their players fit, I think they can just quietly have a good season and just get on with their job there. Isak is an incredible scorer. I think Gordon's going to continue on the same rate. So for me, especially keeping Guimaraes, I think they're going to have a good season. And then I put Aston Villa sixth because signings are very good. I like the quality of the players, the manager, and so on. But I think the Champions League is going to be tough for them. And they've still got to figure out the right kind of combination in the midfield and the rest of the team.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Bailey, for your time, hanging out with us. Hopefully you enjoyed yourself. But please, before you go, plug yourself, plug the things that you do. Let listeners, viewers know where they can find you.
So if you want a weekly newsletter covering Manchester City, whether it's reviews of games, insight into players, data, tactics, scouting reports, all that kind of good stuff, then check out the Sky Blue Times.
Do it.
And you can subscribe to that. You'll get it straight to your inbox. You can follow me on Twitter for threads and other content on there. And you can just get free content on Manchester City all year round.
Hey. All right, Shady Gang. We will be back tomorrow. First kickoff show, pre-match show of the season, live from FanFest. We go live an hour before kickoff. Live reactions to starting 11, matchups, predictions, etc. And then we'll be recording for a new episode out. Shout out to your favorite wrestling podcast. Shout out to Arsenal 86 podcast. Shout out to 50 Plus Donor. Shades of Blue Network, expanding, growing, building. We are much more than just Manchester City now. Tap in with us. We will see you all very soon. You know the vibes. Shady Gang, Shady Gang, Shady Gang.